My name is Shane. I run the events over at TEN Capital Network, and we have our our monthly life science syndicate for you today. We're really excited to have Michael Schmanske of AngelMD join us today. We also have our CEO, Hall Martin, up, and also Michael's going to be giving us a presentation here in a minute. I just wanted to let everybody know in the audience before we get started, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat box throughout the session. We'll get to those if we can. We'll have 3 amazing companies also pitching. They're all going to be raising funding, and then you can stick around afterward. We'll have about 10 minutes to tell you a little bit more how TEN Capital works, if you're raising funding yourself, and all that good stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our CEO, Hall Martin, to get things kicked off.
Great. Thanks, Shane. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a great group in the audience, as well as a great group on the panel. Today, we have with us from AngelMD, Michael Schmanske. He's a longtime investor in the life science space, and he's going to talk a little bit about how do you invest in life science. And the title of his topic is Not All Sectors Are Created Equal, which is a good thing to know as an angel investor, is that there's nuanced differences between different sectors and how do you adjust your investment strategy accordingly. In this current market, which is something of a down market, the 2 things that are very consistent today is biotech, life science, and AI. Those things are still going very strong out there, and we're going to see a couple of those today. One of them is a life science deal. The other 2 are not specifically life science, but we have many angels in the audience that would find those interesting as well. This is one of many events that we do, and as Shane said, after the presentations are over, if you'd like to learn more about how TEN Capital works, hang on the call with us today. Others may drop off, but be glad to tell you more about this and answer your questions in this format. Michael Schmanske. Michael, go ahead and launch your slides and kick off and tell us more about how not all sectors are created equal.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite, Hall. So in our prior session, we were talking about not only why to invest in medical care, but maybe some of the ways to stay away from the worst parts, the bio waste and sharps, so to speak. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how all the different between parts of biotech or healthcare in general are different. So first off, let's just recall that the reason why we love healthcare startups are because the major secular trends in the market, including the fact, I'm just going to run through these, that intellectual property is the king, inflation is a bitch, we're all getting older, so healthcare is going to be more and more used by all of us, by our existing population. But the global growth means that there's more and more consumers constantly moving into the earnings profile where they're going to be demanding quality healthcare. And through all of this, while we may not all exist in a single payer system funded by government expenditure, we're all still set by the pricing policies within that. Even here in the United States, we all run off the Medicare, Medicaid pricing structure for the most part. So given that, how are they different? So that's the common things that all of these healthcare companies have in common. But what are they different about? Well, first thing you need to know is that generally speaking, your Silicon Valley VCs have no idea what they're doing in healthcare. And that's not an insult. That's just an aspect of how different this sector really is. I mean, all you have to do is look at some of the major blowups like Theranos to know that clearly huge numbers of otherwise very smart people were completely taken for a ride as soon as you got into healthcare. Well, let's think a little bit about why that is. Why is it that they would be open to that kind of thing? Well, one reason is that they're used to thinking about continuous revenue growth, and thinking about existing statistics. Whereas if you're going to invest in healthcare, you're by its very nature usually investing in products that aren't coming to market for many years. There is no revenue to invest in. There's no revenue model to invest in. You just don't know. So this long timeline to market is, again, some of the reasons we're going to be talking about how the different sectors within healthcare itself differentiate. But it also means that you are often really betting at that speculative edge. It's kind of why we joke jokingly about the bleeding edge as a double entendre with surgery, is because you truly are out there in your revenue models and you're betting on things that are going to happen far in the future. The other thing that most VCs don't recognize is the incredible amount of regulatory oversight. Now, when I say VCs don't get it, if you talk about healthcare VCs or people in that space, they certainly understand. But the moment you start bleeding into the digital investor world or the Silicon world or any of the other fintechy kind of worlds, they start moving adrift. They start measuring things that don't matter for the final aspect of whether success will come to this company or not. And they start betting on the things that they're used to, their own rules of thumb that they apply to their space just doesn't work here. You know, one of the big questions you've got to ask when you go into healthcare is not whether this would be a net benefit, is this an improvement over the standard of care, but actually, who is paying for that improvement of that standard of care and who benefits from that standard of care being improved? If you can't create a product that's going to increase the bottom line revenue from your hospital systems or insurance providers, they're not going to invest in the product. All we have to do is look at the reaction to the weight loss drugs, to the heart disease statistics that we saw the last couple of days with the, I think it's Pfizer was the product. No, it wasn't Pfizer, Eli Lilly. It's a product for weight loss. What does that mean? Well, weight loss obviously is going to be a massive market for drugs. I mean, I could use it myself. We all could probably. But the fact that they were able to prove a 20% decrease in cardiovascular outcomes and stroke risk meant that now your insurance providers and your healthcare systems can justify paying for the drug. If they were paying for weight loss, what they were doing is they were paying for lifestyle benefits of their patients. The patients may have loved it. The doctors may have been happy to prescribe it. But at the end of the day, who's going to pay for it? Well, heart disease comes in, and now you say, well, if I pay for that, then I can decrease my expense coverage of my heart disease patients. So therefore, I'm going to earn on that. And that's why Lilly and all of these companies reacted so strongly to that heart disease statistics when, in fact, we already knew a lot of the weight loss statistics, right? So this is a key component that's missed. Further, like finally, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in terms of looking at the individual sectors, but the adoption hurdles are just different. You know, if you want somebody to upgrade their iPhone 13 or whatever to the next model, whatever number we're on these days, you need to convince the consumer that they want to change their mind. And that means that you really only need to convince the first 5 or 10% of the adopters, the early adopters. They'll provide the feedback and provide the momentum for later adoption. In healthcare, it doesn't work that way. A lot of people aren't going to adopt until they are forced to because they are stubborn and they have a certain workflow, or because the benefits are not immediately obvious to them. We get a lot of pushback from doctors who look at the statistics that say 30% of this procedure ends up in a failure. And so therefore a device that drops that failure rate from 30 to 10 means that there's a huge, massive benefit to the healthcare system. And you go to the doctors with that and they say, well, my failure rate's not 30%. You know, 90% of Americans are above average drivers, right? 90% of doctors are above average surgical technicians. That's the way it works. You know, everybody assumes that when you're talking about failure rates, it's always somebody else. That's just one small example of adoption hurdle problems within the healthcare sector that you just don't have when it comes to consumer technology or fashion or whatever else it may be. So that's something to keep in mind. So when we talk about what's different within healthcare, personally, I like to break it down into 5 technology type channels. And I'll walk through these with you and we'll talk about why they're different. But I want you to adopt this framework when you're thinking about a product, because it matters for a lot of those key components that we just spoke of. First off, we have therapeutics. Therapeutics are your lottery ticket devices. They're the weight loss drug, the lipo, whatever it may be, the cancer cure. You invest now, it's going to pay out 6 to 10 years from now with a potential 50, 100 mega multiple payout, right? But like lottery tickets, your hit rate is going to be fairly small. By the time you have a decent amount of certainty looking forward, a lot of that price has already been fully discounted in the holder of the product. You know, you talk about Lilly, the reason it rallied on the news was not because the weight loss data came out, but the heart disease data, right? So the new piece of information. But that implies that up until now, that drug was fully priced. And in fact, it may be overpriced. You have a lot of people saying that it was massively overreacted in terms of the impact on the market cap of Eli Lilly. But therapeutics are the big king. Now, as a private investor, I don't go anywhere near therapeutics unless I'm going to sprinkle like a nice little scatter of some of the best through my product. And the reason is your regulatory adoption hurdles, your IP frameworks, your valuation models, all your clinical trial testing, the timeline involved, like maybe waiting 10 years to get your exit. Like these are all things that are really more about large portfolio investments as opposed to individual pick a target, sniper shoot if you're going to be a private investor, you're really thinking about being a sniper, not a shotgun, right? So therapeutics are best suited for a shotgun approach of building a massive portfolio of companies. So we're not going to talk too much about those today, even though they're the exciting one that everyone wants to talk about normally. The ones that I love are internal and external medical devices. What does that mean? Well, an internal medical device might be a new heart pump or a pacemaker or a vascular device that helps clear clots to prevent stroke damage, these types of things. Why are they different? Well, I don't have enough time today to go into every small detail. I think in the future, we'll go through and dig into each of these subcategories individually because they all have their own nuance and special aspects. When you think about internal medical device, though, you're thinking about a heavy FDA regulated product, much like drugs, because they can kill you. So if they don't do it right, they can kill you. Whereas an external medical device would be something like an on-the-skin pacemaking device or a monitor, a heart monitor, right? Or catheter devices or other types of things, or surgical devices like new means of laparoscopic surgery or a cordless gun or whatever it may be. These are things that are still FDA regulated, but they pass through a lighter regulatory process because their use case doesn't need to prove they're not going to kill the patient. That's almost assumed. It's like you're not doing something crazy to the patient, you're not cutting into their skin or getting into their body. Then what you have to prove is that you're worth the money and you're not a danger, that you make the situation better for the patient, and you need proof cases for all of that, but you don't need all the clinical trials and the years of backup that a typical internal medical device or therapeutic requires. So I love external medical devices. They're my favorite spot. We'll talk a little bit about that when we wrap. The other two that are often like widely touted, and this is where Silicon Valley often dances in and gets their nose chopped off, is in digital solutions and direct-to-consumer products. Digital solutions fall across almost as wide a range or spectrum of products as all of healthcare devices. So again, topic for another day. When you think of digital solutions, you're talking about everything from AI-assisted devices for diagnostics all the way through to consumer-facing platforms or service-providing platforms in the digital realm, right? And then finally, we tag into the direct consumer product. And here we're talking about your Nooms, your diabetes platforms, your doc.com or whatever is that are maybe out there in terms of media platforms. And again, they follow a totally different rule set. Silicon Valley belongs in that set. They can do the analysis in that set. Investments in that set should never be made pre-revenue. Unlike your first three categories, where you're going to be almost investing entirely pre-revenue, you're never investing in digital solutions or direct consumer without a revenue model, because execution matters so much there. We'll talk a little bit about why that's the case too. So those were the technology innovation channels. Let's talk about the use case channels because they matter as well. Is this something that's going to cure a disease by its very inception? Okay, very rarely happens. Great if you can, massive payout structure. Generally speaking, they fall into the therapeutic or internal device case because you're not going to cure something just by putting like a monitor on somebody's forehead, okay? So we get into the treatment, which means like, okay, we're not going to directly address the key component, but we're going to address the follow-on aspects that create the chronic or fatal aspects of the disease. Think of like Alzheimer's palliative care or drugs that decrease your diabetes risk or decrease your statins. Great example. Statins specifically would be a treatment, but not a cure, right? Finally, we get chronic or palliative care treatments. And what that means is something that decreases the severity of the symptom, but doesn't necessarily cure it. Now, on the one hand, your biggest danger with your palliative care components is a better solution going to come along within the cash out range of the expected revenue model of the company. What does that mean? Well, you've got a painkiller, right? You haven't solved anything. You haven't developed a therapeutic. You're not actually addressing like any of the pathway of why the pain is there. You're just giving somebody to make it feel less. There could be 1,000 painkillers that come out after yours. Any one of them might be better or worse. And then you end up in a business retention and acquisition model, which looks a lot like a direct consumer product. Think of like Bayer aspirin versus generic aspirin kind of model of the problem. But if we go further up the line into rarer or niche drugs, the big advantage is if you do solve a major problem, your revenue stream is perpetual, right? And one of the big problems of the biotech oncology treatments, the cancer treatments, is if it's one shot and done, then I, as the biotech company, don't get to charge you for the next 10 years. I've cured you in 3 months. I'm only going to get one shot at you. So I have to price it accordingly, right? Whereas if I've got you on a razor blade model where I know you're going to come and you're going to be using this product on a monthly basis or a regular basis, I can create a pricing and distribution model that fits that. So that's something to really consider about how it is you're addressing your use case market, right? Finally, you have the last two, which is basically prevention and operational efficiency. This falls very squarely into that realm of who are you selling to, right? If you're selling to the hospital system, you are massively leaning on operational efficiency. If you are selling to your consumer, you're leaning on prevention. If you're selling to insurance companies, it might be both, right? Because they both want to prevent the aspect of chronic long-term care and expensive care. So something that is preventative to diabetes, massively beneficial to insurance companies, right? Whereas operational efficiency, decreasing the time that it enters to enter records into the emergency electronic record systems, or decreasing the risk of antibiotic resistant bacterial strains, right? These are things that fall into operational efficiency and prevention. In your use case, the way you present it to the consumer, the way you think it as an investor, definitively changes because your business case is going to change. Okay. So what are the categories that change most dramatically across these sectors? I spoke about regulatory approval and the long timelines. So on a therapeutic, you might have 7 years before the product is even approved. So you did all your research, you did all the product, you found the next cure for cancer, and now it's going to be 7 years before it's even in market, because you need to do your phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. You're looking for exit points. That's the last point. I'm kind of bringing that up last first here. It definitively determines when your exits are going to occur and the types of exits that you're going to witness as an investor. That regulatory approval changes, right? If it's an internal medical device, your time to market might be along the lines of 5 years, because 2 years of development, 3 years of clinical trials instead of 5 to 7 years of clinical trials, right? You still need to prove long-term efficacy. You still need all of the bench tests, the animal tests, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, but your long-term chronic care aspects are generally waived, not waived, but waived with a monitoring aspect, like they have follow-up issues on that. Whereas if you're talking about an external medical device that's merely a diagnostic or a monitor, your regulatory approval process might be only 1 to 2 years. I mean, by that point, as soon as you've solved all of the engineering problems and you're able to go to what we call a pre-submission meeting with the FDA, they provide you with all the questions and interesting things that they think they might have an issue with. As long as you're able to solve them, you're talking about 1 to 2 years to market. So much, much tighter timeline. And as we go down that structure of different types of devices, digital and direct to consumer, that timeline shortens. But what does that mean? It also means that your competitors have a shortened timeline. So think about that, the painkiller model, right? If you've got a product that's a digital device and you don't have a definitive advantage, the probability of somebody else being able to come to market with a similar digital solution within the next 6 months is basically zero. Someone's going to come along. Have you achieved critical mass during that time? So regulatory hurdles can actually be your friend as an investor, because it gives you enough time looking into the future to look at the other potential competitors to the investment that you're making. Whereas if you invest in a digital device product, it might be entirely based on execution. You better be leaning really hard onto understanding that the executives of that company have a proven ability to execute, because it's all on execution at that point. All right. Finally, I'm just going to end off here with the fact that your revenue and execution models, as I've been implied, are going to change drastically. That also means, what does your sales distribution model look like? With therapeutics, you're not worried. Therapeutic passes muster with the FDA. It has a proven advantage. You've probably already been acquired for the last 3 years. Eli Lilly might have already bought you with royalty promises on the drug and is paying for your tier 3 trial or phase 3 clinical trials at that point, right? So you're not worried about your distribution model. But if you're an external medical device, you're probably going to have to do some of the sales yourself. At least going in the market, you're going to need an entire sales and distribution plan. You're going to need to be thoughtful about the strategy of how you enter the market. You need to be thoughtful about hurdles, all of these things, right? So when you as an investor are thinking about it, that's what you need to know, okay? Is that for these easier to market things, the execution and revenue models are a lot more important than the therapeutics. Let me put a little aside here. Anybody that shows you a pro forma for a medical device is scratching an itch or smoking crack, meaning most likely the scratching an itch, because I don't know a lot of medical device or medical startups that are literally smoking crack. The point is that somebody in Silicon Valley, one of their VCs asked for a pro forma model and said they provided it. It is 100% guesswork. On the other hand, I desperately want to know that the executive team has the ability to produce a pro forma. If they look at you cross-eyed and are like, I don't know, we haven't even thought about it. I'm like, okay, good luck with your rest of your life. I don't need to be thinking anymore about this company, right? But that is the case. Like, the pro forma is guesswork. Their model to build the pro forma proves they have the chops to actually execute in a company. Okay, so that's what you're looking for in those types of things. Finally, I mentioned exit opportunities, and I'm almost just going to leave it that it's different between all the different products. Like, in one case, you're looking for a pre-approval acquisition in therapeutics in order to help fund you through phase 3 clinical trials in the last 3 years to market. You as the investor may not see an exit at that point. Most likely you won't, but you'll have a lot more de-risking and a lot more certainty. So you feel like you have an exit at that point. It might even list, it might go public at that point, in which case you do have a defined exit opportunity. Internal medical devices, you're generally acquired by a major producer of other internal medical devices because they have the ability to sell high margin, high product equipment. Think about your pacemaker models, your other types of models. Generally speaking, you're getting acquired by your Baxters or your, Strykers or orthopedics or whatever it may be. If you're looking at external medical devices, I already mentioned you need a distribution plan because you may be operating before you're acquired or before you go public. If you're a digital device or a direct consumer, I honestly don't know. I haven't seen many exits in that space that have impressed me. Those that have exited have mostly exited as a bubble, in which case I thought the people that were buying them at that point were fools in the first place. If you were exiting, if you were a VC, I would have been screaming at you to hit every bid and get out at that moment. But, that's your flavor, that's your taste. I'll tell you mine. So finally, just to bring it home in terms of this presentation, is that if you really want to travel in this space, do not travel alone, okay? If you're looking at an orthopedic device, find an orthopedic surgeon and ask their opinion about adoption hurdles or whether it's efficacious, whether the problem the company is trying to solve actually matters. Don't guess, don't do it yourself. Don't look at their board and say, oh, they've got a bunch of orthopedic surgeons, it must be a great company. No, find a third-party orthopedic surgeon or talk to someone like AngelMD. I'm at AngelMD Capital now, by the way, but find someone at AngelMD or one of that group and ask for their opinions on whether this process is something that is investable, right? The docs in the specialty know better than you ever will with all the research, with whatever research you want. Okay, work with other investors. You're doing the right thing here, teaming up with TEN Capital and the teams like that. Getting feedback, having discussion rooms, just having that non-echo chamber feedback. You don't want to just have your own opinions bounced back at you like you're existing in your own little firm. Go talk to other people, get their opinions, get their insights on the product. Just the conversation itself will be illuminating for you, which leads to my third point here. Watch as many of these pitches as humanly possible. I can't tell you how much I've learned about medical care in the last 5 years just by watching company pitches and really paying attention, asking the hard questions. One of the great things about being an investor that doesn't know anything about medical care or healthcare itself, the scientific aspects, is you can ask the dumb questions like, what do you mean by a protein pathway? What do you mean there are dangers of genetic sequencing? What do you mean when you say that you need a 510K approval? Ask the questions, educate yourself. These pitch things are fantastic for that. If after these companies present, you're not lighting up that chat box with questions for them, you're not getting the most out of this experience as you should. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. So healthcare is unique in that in most early stage investments, hell, in most mature investments, there's a massive asymmetry of knowledge, meaning that professional investors know so much more than the private investors ever could. Early stage startups, that's completely inverted. It's no longer the case that you as a small amateur investor can't outperform the professionals. because the professionals don't necessarily have the expertise or the resources to dig deep. They're sitting in that echo chamber. They're paying attention to the board of directors of Theranos, right? They're doing all the dumb stuff that we're telling you not to do. The smart stuff is get into the weeds, talk to the individuals, and do your own work. You will be much, much better off for it. With that, I think I'm going to tie off. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything else they'd like to jump in on. I'm happy to talk about this topic or any other if you like.
Great. Thanks, Michael. If anybody in the audience has a question, go ahead and post it. My question for you, Michael, is we see a lot of therapeutics coming into these rooms and on their way to a FDA approval process. But the reality is the majority of them will not actually be approved because they just aren't repeatable, predictable, and efficacious enough. How in the very early stages can you look at something and start looking for what signals do you look at that says this is probably going to make it or this is not going to make it?
All right. Most early stage clinical results are either bench model tests, which means they're testing in a petri dish, right? Or they're animal model tests, right? I don't give an effing fig about bench tests or, ex vitro, like meaning like outside the body tests. They're science experiments, right? If you see something that's really cool or somebody that's trustworthy or interesting pathways that they're investigating, definitely tag it. You want to put $5,000 in as a throwaway just so you get on their calls on a quarterly basis and find out if they're making progress. Sure, knock yourself out. I don't like it at all. When it goes to animal models, I do like animal models as an initial test, but there's a few things that you really need to dig into. One is, how similar is the animal biome to the same biome in a human? And I mean biome. I don't mean genome. I don't mean pathways. It's not about the protein pathway at that point. It's not about this. Can you operate in the human biome the same way it's operating in the mouse biome? Like, what are the concentration levels you're going to be expecting in human versus what you're able to do in a mouse? When you've got a very specifically designed animal for a specific kind of test, you generally dose these suckers at 10 to 30 times the dose that's going to be efficacious, like that you're going to use in a human, just because you're desperate to prove efficacy, right? Now, the good news about that is you will test the hell out of toxicity. If they're going to 30x, because that's like phase 2, like A, you've proven that it can work in a human, and not kill them, but B, what's its long-term toxicity and dosing requirements in order for efficacy? Like, if you've already crushed some mice with 50x like concentrations of your dose, that's great. Did it operate as well at 5? Like, did you test them up to 50 only for the toxicity? Or did you have to go to 50x in order to get the response you were looking for, right? That's your biggie. If you needed to go for a high concentration in order to test the response function, I'm terrified because I don't know what's going to happen when you start using that in humans. But if you're saying it's efficacious at 1, and we tested all the way up to 50 on preliminary toxicity, amen, brother. I'm going to look at you a lot harder. Because now I know that, at least from a toxicity standpoint, if a 1x concentration is ineffective in a human, you can at least try to go up to 5 or 10 to see if that's effective. There's a famous example with solid tumor penetrations of biotherapeutics. And the fact that you could test all you wanted on the cells and it was massively efficacious, right? But then it turned out the whole problem was delivery, in the sense that when you were injecting this biotherapeutic into the system, it was existing around the cluster of the solid tumor, but it wouldn't penetrate into the center in order to deliver the dosing where the cells were actually spawning. And then as you killed the outer layer with your therapeutic, the penetration problem became even worse. Because now you're digging not through even a bioactive screen, but now a biodisactive, like an armored shell, as it were, right? So these are the types of things you want to think about in therapy. And then, like, honestly, I could go for half an hour on that question. That's just the first things that come to mind as the big flags that I think about.
Those are very helpful pointers. We see these deals all the time, and we're trying to figure out what should we be looking for to suss out the ones that might go the distance and those that are not. But appreciate you sharing that with us today, Michael. And we'll put your contact details in the chat box for those who want to contact you. And we'll also have a recording for anybody that wants it afterwards as well. But appreciate that presentation. And with that, we're going to move to our first presenter, Nicholas Kuhn of CTEX Technologies. This is not a life science deal, but something that's not too far from it. And we'll have Nicholas launch his slides, and he has 15 minutes to present. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end of that to answer questions as well. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Thanks, Hall. Yeah, I'm not medical, but this is advanced materials. We do actually have medical applications for our technology, but this is really an advanced materials play. So generally, an advanced materials play, you're going to have a broad range of applications for a unique material technology. So SEDEX is an unusual company in that we've essentially created a material that mimics how the gecko can climb walls. They have this very unique ability to adhere. Just like this gecko's hanging from this small wires just off of its toe pad. The small mushroom-shaped fibers that are in a gecko's toe are what we have incorporated into gripping and tape materials. So we are both a consumer and industrial tape company. We're on a $4 million run rate. We have a very deep IP portfolio, over 20 patents and over 20 trade secrets. We're based in Pittsburgh. We manufacture our own products made in the USA, and we're currently raising $1 million convertible debt bridge round, which I'll talk about at the end. But we're a manufacturer of revolutionary high-performance dry adhesive and grip products. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology. Essentially, we create these microstructures through a fairly proprietary process. We create a female that allows us to either do injection molded materials, compression molding, and we can then make parts that are either, for example, tape, or we can make parts that are die cut. So our consumer products are primarily the grip products that are die cut, and our industrial products are the tape products. So what are we talking about here? So I'm going to show you here a video. These are our microstructures moving across skin. And what's really unique about our technology in the gripping application is that in wet and oily conditions, we're about a 3x improvement in the coefficient of friction to skin. So if you look at this graph, the black is the same material without our microfibers, and the red has the microfibers included. And when you get to wet conditions, you can see the dramatic difference in friction, and in oily conditions, the same. So what does this translate into from a product standpoint? Well, 3 years ago, we launched our first consumer product, which was nose pads for eyewear. We now have over 40 SKUs on Amazon, 18 SKUs in nose pads, so ultra thin, regular, ultra thick, different colors. We have a range of AirPod solutions and a really big range of gaming solutions. I'm going to switch gears here and play a video, but basically what we have is a very soft, comfortable material, has a very unique ability to grip to skin. It's ideal for sweaty, athletic conditions. It's cool gecko technology made in the USA. It's a Carnegie Mellon spin-out, ISO certified.
Finally, your glasses are comfortable. Natural evolution gave the gecko its amazingly strong grip. Our multi-patented SEDEX technology duplicates the microstructured fibers on a gecko's foot for a revolutionary new way to keep your glasses comfortably and securely in place. Like a gecko's foot, the thousands of anti-slip fibers on each SEDEX nose pad rest comfortably on the skin surface for a secure, relaxed, comfortable fit, even on wet or oily skin. Stay in control with the comfort, support, and zero slip adhesion of SEDEX nose pads, inspired by nature, perfected by science. Order yours today.
So, we have similar videos for our thumbstick grips for gaming consoles, for the earbud solutions. So, all told, we're talking about a $40 billion total addressable market opportunity. If you think about it, there's close to 4 billion devices globally that can use our technology, billion iframes, 300 million earbuds, 500 million gaming consoles. So that translates into a $40 billion opportunity. What you see here is a graph of our growth over the last 3 years, quarter over quarter. And we are now at a 4 million run rate. The last quarter, we passed the $1 million quarter. So our growth is both in the US and international. We're about 80% US, 20% in Europe and Japan. So far I've just talked about our consumer products. Now I'm going to switch, spin your head a little here to our industrial application. Again, remember, it's all the same core technology. But on the industrial side, we make tape that has the ability to adhere to smooth surfaces on a repetitive basis. So, this shows a graph of our tape being reapplied to a metal surface 1,000 times. And you can see only a drop of less than 20% in performance. So it's a very clean, dry adhesive. It can be cleaned with alcohol or soap. So it's also sustainable. There are many applications where the reusability of this tape is highly attractive. And we can use these microstructures in a wide range of materials. So in a way, you have to think about it. We're completely reinventing tape, because instead of it being a chemical adhesion, it's a mechanical adhesion based on these microstructures. So our main products are in polyurethanes, but we also more recently have launched a line of silicone products. These have the ability to go up to 300 degrees C and are of particular interest to the semiconductor world. But basically, we can change the level of adhesion of our tape by changing the microstructure. So the exact same material, if we change the size and shape of the microstructure, we can do a low, medium, or high strength tape. So, as is the case often in advanced material deals, there's a wide range of applications. Huge market opportunity. The tape industry is enormous, multi-$100 billion industry. The areas that we are focused on primarily today are in the printing and semiconductor industry. We do have some projects in medical, or some customers in medical and automotive, and also in a drag reduction application, which is a totally different application. So I'm going to talk about a couple key customer examples. So this is our closest near-term revenue on the industrial side. We're working with a company called Tesla, which is a major tape manufacturer. They're a competitor of 3M's based in Germany. And essentially, we've been working with them for about 1.5 years, incorporating our technology into flexographic printing rolls. So our tape is actually wrapped around this roll, and they're attaching these flexible plastic plates. So this is how high-speed printing is done. It's about a $300 million global market for tape. These are the forecasts they've given us over the next 3 years. So it's about a $9 million opportunity, over the next 3 years. And so we are going through a soft launch. We did an evaluation at Clemson in the US, then they did another one in Europe, and then now we're going through a soft launch with them in the US. So I just want to explain that one application. We have many different applications. The other key focus is in the semiconductor industry. These are some of the companies we have projects that are currently ongoing. These are major multi-billion-dollar semiconductor companies, all in different applications: semiconductor polishing, chip handling, back grinding and dicing, and temporary bonding are all applications for our technology. So our team is an interesting mix. We have, the founder, Metin City, is what I call a global scientist. He's based in Stuttgart. He runs the Max Planck Institute in Stuttgart. He gets invited to Bezos' annual meeting of like 300 top scientists. So he's that kind of guy. It's the guys who were his first and second PhD student are part of our company. And they, Paul Glass is our CTO. He also runs the consumer business. So really strong depth in technical advanced materials. But we brought in a lot of consumer expertise because we launched these consumer products. And I'll highlight Dina Gazarian, who is VP of Sales for Monster and is part of our board of directors. So revenue, as I said, we're at a 4 million run rate. We're trying to get to 6 by the end of the year. The revenue forecast is primarily on the consumer side right now. We expect to do about $1 million in the B2B side, but over time, the B2B side grows. We will probably exit the consumer business relatively soon, and you know, redouble our focus on the industrial business as we go out here. So as I said, we're raising $1 million bridge round. Our investors so far are all primarily corporate venture. We have raised a total of 11 million in equity and 6 million in grants. The corporate venture are a European, a major conglomerate in Europe. Shinetsu, which is a Japanese advanced materials company, led the Series B. And ITIC, which is the investment arm of ITRI, which is a large industrial consortium in Taiwan that was originally in TSMC. So they are very interested in semiconductor stuff. So anyways, this is pretty plain vanilla convertible debt, 20% discount, 8% interest rate, $20 million valuation cap, 1.5 liquidation preference. ITIC is reinvested. They put in $250,000. We have another investor's committed 150,000, so we're still looking for the last 600,000. And this is essentially just designed to extend our runway as we work on getting some key strategics into the Series B, in addition to Shinetsu. And our expectation is we're not going to be doing any additional fundraising after this series, what we're calling the Series B plus. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Can you tell us more about some of these corporate VCs and why are they investing in your deal? What are they hoping to get out of it? Is it a product? Is it an investment? What are they looking for?
I would say it's both. I mean, Shinetsu invested and also got some licensing rights in, you know, non-exclusive rights in Japan for specific applications like consumer electronics. So I think they invested, one, for the opportunity, and two, to be able to play in this space.
Okay, great. Michael, what's your question?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was going to hop on here. No problem at all. I actually think this is a fascinating product. I'm an engineer by heart, so I was kind of geeking out a little bit. Nicholas, you mentioned the silicon chip manufacturers are interested, but you're also talking about consumer product. What do you see as your total breakdown across different kind of subsectors? Like, who do you think is going to be your final product market audience?
Well, I think it's going to be, are you saying like in terms of which sector?
Well, when you mentioned silicon like chip manufacturers, I think use case is phenomenal within the computer hardware area itself, like in terms of new ways of attaching the boards to one another, or chips to boards, because you have something that's heat resistant by doing this.
I think the semiconductor space is going to be the biggest. I mean, we have a joint development agreement, for example, with Intel, where we are working on a chip handling application with them. I mean, to me, that's where we're going to have to see the most traction right now. And there's a lot of money pouring into the semiconductor industry, as you know. So I feel like that's where we're gonna be, you know, primarily focused here in the near future.
That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at temporary bonding, because I know from a manufacturing standpoint, the temporary bonding to the individual chips is a big, big deal. The ability to attach it while you're doing the process and then detach it cleanly with no residue. So how do you guys manage the detachment phase of this? Like, how do you get it off? Like, is it a sticky, like my 3M?
So the thing that's interesting, like what we have shown Intel is, you know, these microstructures, if you think about it, they're like, it's like a little mushroom, and the surface of the mushroom is smooth. And so van der Waals forces are what create the bond. But if you press down on it slightly, the mushroom buckles and then it releases. So they're actually able to like put a slight amount of pressure on the chip before they pick it up and it releases from the carrier.
Cool.
So that's one of the characteristics of our material. That's the silicone material.
Great. Well, thanks, Nicholas. We're at the end of our time. Thanks, Michael, for the question. Our next speaker is going to be Adam Greenspan of Trace Orthopedics. Adam, if you want your slides and kick off when you're ready.
All right, great. I'm Adam Greenspan, CEO of Trace Orthopedics, joined by my partner and co-founder, Dr. Bill Morrison. With our products, tendon repairs are made easier, restoring mobility for millions of patients. There is a major gap in the treatment of partial tendon tears. They occur all over the body, most commonly around the hip, shoulder, and ankle. But due to the cost, risk, and recovery time, they're typically not referred for surgery until it becomes a complete tear, which can take years. Our solution is the patented Trace tendon fastener system. We use what's called a percutaneous approach, which is insertion through a single small incision guided by ultrasound. And here I'm going to pull in a animation video here. So the insertion is through this this needle, this minimally invasive needle. The device is an implantable anchor screw and spring washer that's fitted inside this delivery needle. That's the ultrasound probe. It is guided by ultrasound. So coming in the picture now is the implant. The spring actually compresses into a washer, and then the loose tendon is pinned down, reattached to bone without full anesthesia in an outpatient setting. And this major breakthrough is what makes partial tears more treatable. Current landscape ranges from minimal to more invasive. Frontline treatment is conservative, including injections, starting on the left here, needling, or a microablation technique called tenotomy. It's a growing market, still does not achieve repair. On the other side is open or arthroscopic surgery, a mature and crowded market, but there's nothing in between that bridges these treatment approaches. This manifests as a major treatment gap for partial tear. That's where Trace comes in with a repair product that is minimally invasive. We're seeing a huge market opportunity. Over 31 million cases are reported each year in the United States. We have a readily serviceable market niche classified by cases of partial tear that have clean edges, i.e. no shredding of the tendon, no retraction away from the site. This accounts for about 10% of partial tear cases that we estimate, representing a $2.4 billion serviceable market. Here's a sample case that started with a partial tear of the gluteus medius at the hip, seen on MRI, as the brightness pointed to on this left image is fluid at the injury site. This patient had conservative management, platelet-rich plasma injection, and physical therapy. 6 months later, on the far right, the tendon has completely pulled away from the bone, shown by a dramatically increased bright fluid signal. At this point, the only therapies to offer the patient are open surgery or a walker. These cases are our low-hanging fruit. We initially proved the concept by placing our product into human cadavers, shown here, which is standard for feasibility testing musculoskeletal devices. It's Dr. Morrison here testing it out. We actually updated the designs and developed product specs, prototypes for more cadaver labs, and animal testing that I'll talk about in a minute. This 3D printed delivery system that is shown on the top right or top left passed our design review. So, and we're able to use it with ultrasound guidance. It's a portable unit that Dr. Morrison's holding there. So yes, we recently completed a pilot animal study with the veterinary school at Colorado State University, which operates a cost-friendly contract research organization. While Trace device profile seen on the top. It's much smaller by comparison to the test washer off the shelf. Ours maintains stability in 3 different sheep. Also repeatedly withstood nearly 700 pounds of force in mechanical testing, which is over triple the strength of industry standard suture anchors. And then there's an X-ray image to show the compression effect that we saw. We do have robust intellectual property. Patents are issued and pending worldwide on the fastener implant, the delivery system, and various improvements, including material compositions and coatings. Plus, we have method claims. For the FDA, the trace tendon fastener is a class 2 medical device. We'll get clearance using the 510(k) pathway. So no clinical trials as we show equivalence to existing products. And our predicate is an anchor washer system. We've started the submission process with the FDA. Next, we'll share results from the sheep pilot and our protocol for a pivotal animal study. This will take us into 2024. We're on track for clearance in 12 to 15 months, with initial market launch planned shortly after in Q3 of 24. We'll be ready to commercialize on day 1 after FDA clearance with planned alpha launch. Trace has a dozen commitments now from interventional hip specialists to be alpha sites as we launch with the gluteus medius as our beachhead market. Then we have 52 general hospitals and private practice groups lined up for our subsequent expansion phase. We will add more clinical applications, scaling the sales team for calling on orthopedists, plus partnering with international distributors. By then, we envision specific medical reimbursement codes for the trace procedure. In the meantime, there are general payment codes available that can be applied to cover trace repairs. This will facilitate acceptance by physicians. Interventional radiologists will be attracted by the surgical rate for these procedures. Orthopedists have a strong interest to do these as well, given the short procedure time. Our revenue model flows from selling single-use procedure-based products to hospitals and surgical centers. In the context of the overall payment scheme, trace devices will be procured by the sites of service, which will follow our guidance to obtain medical reimbursement as applicable. The initial ASP of the main trace fastener kit is $800 with a COGS of $198. Some cases will use a second preloaded fastener with similar profit margin, just over 75%. Looking at the forecast, our first revenue is in late 2024 from the Gluteus Alpha launch. We'll have repeat users, we'll add indications, fueling a jump in procedures, pushing our annualized revenues up quickly. By 2025, we'll be profitable, repairing rotator cuff and Achilles tendons, and also used as an add-on in total joint replacements, as we're hearing from orthopedic surgeons. Okay, our team covers the entire medtech spectrum with dozens of patents issued, products launched, and deals executed. I'm CEO, biomedical engineer with over 15 years in licensing and entrepreneurial program management. Dr. Morrison's a KOL in musculoskeletal radiology, and he already has a product, steerable biopsy, or steerable needle, not just for biopsies. Our board chair is Paul Janeski. He runs a medical device incubator and an asset broker firm, Hatch Medical, and he is an active angel. He's a member of Keiretsu Southeast and brings over 30 years in device sales and executive management. We also have world-class scientific advisors, and our medical advisory board includes multiple key opinion leaders in sports medicine and orthopedics to help drive clinical adoption. Our Series A is open now. It's led by Keiretsu Forum Mid-Atlantic. It's $1.5 million at a $4.5 million pre. We're using their investor-friendly term sheet, which is preferred equity, 1x liquidation preference. We have about 300,000 still open. So we're in the last tranche. We just recently announced extra investment incentives involving the attached warrants. So we're bumping up to 20% warrant coverage for this last tranche that we're subscribing now. And we're also offering the warrants at half price if exercised by August 31st. And a number of our investors are striking. Our goal is to achieve a premium exit monetizing our IP by licensing to a strategic or through an outright acquisition. We're projecting an ROI of about 5 to 16x in 18 to 48 months, corresponding to these 4 value-inflecting milestones that I see along our exit path. Getting FDA clearance, then after successful alpha launch, the usual target is 100 cases, there's a strong likelihood of a high-value license or an early acquisition at that point, and if not, we'll open a B round to expand indications, introduce product improvements, such as surface coatings and absorbable compositions, and drive to an exit target over 100, approaching 150 million. Trace Orthopedics is pioneering image-guided fixation. Join us as we give people back their mobility.
Michael, what's your first question?
Well, Adam, I don't think we have enough time to go through all of my questions. I'd really dig in, but let me hit on a few of them right off the top. I was really glad you addressed the predicate issue, because let me just do a very quick follow-up. Don't go into too much detail. Why is there not a problem with edge tearing with the existing standard of care or with your product? Edge tearing being, for the rest of the audience, that when you punch a hole in something like a piece of paper or whatever, you tend to get more tears around that stress. It's a very stressful thing to
Bill, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Tendons are extremely sturdy, and we actually, in our testing, that came up in our initial questions about the product, and we did a lot of strength testing and found that poking a little hole in the tendon didn't really weaken the tendon at all.
I'm less worried about the net strength and more worried about the repetitive stress, like continuous, like, you're getting.
Yeah, we've done cyclic
thousands
testing
a day
as well.
Okay. And do you obviously anchors are sometimes not recommended for some use cases. Do you perceive that you would have those same restrictions, that some types of tendons are just not appropriate for this, but they would be the exact same set as currently would be mandated by existing anchors?
Yeah, we are looking at anchors. Suture anchors are used for full thickness tears, usually when the tear is torn completely and retracted.
Right.
And the surgeon has to go in either arthroscopically or open surgery and pull the tendon back to its footprint and tie it down. There's a lot of limitations to suture anchors based on the fact that it's a suture and an anchor tied together. There are a bunch of weak points in that construct. We don't have that kind of weakness. And also we are delivering it percutaneously rather than through surgery, which will improve our recovery time. Now, some tendons are not going to be amenable to percutaneous repair, and those include shredded tendons where there's no good tendon substance to grab onto, and tendons that are completely torn and retracted that are not at the footprint.
Yeah, so essentially the same use cases as the existing sutures or anchors. Like you could use this product in all of the existing use cases.
Not really. Suture anchors really are for full thickness tears that are retracted.
Sorry, I didn't mean suture anchors. I meant the existing screw anchors. Sorry, I misspoke.
The washers.
The
washers really are an older version of a suture anchor that are used in certain scenarios, like MCL repairs and stuff like that.
Okay.
So they were kind of an early form of a suture anchor. They're not used as much anymore, washers, because they tend to cause tissue necrosis. When they're pinned down to the tissue, it tends to eat through the tissue.
Yeah.
So we don't really have that limitation either, since the pressure that our coil applies is kind of a graded pressure from inside to outside. So it allows the tendon to kind of breathe, as it were.
Okay. And obviously you have, you're an orthopedic surgeon or significant experience in the case. What has been your feedback from other orthopedic surgeons when asked? Like, do you have orthopedic surgeons as investors in this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I listened to your talk, and surgeons are very compartmentalized, extremely so. So when an Angel Group has one orthopedic advisor, I'm kind of incredulous about the global expertise and open-mindedness of a particular surgeon. So I've spoken to a lot of my orthopedic network, and we've gotten a lot of interest, especially for gluteus repairs, because it's not a great surgery for them to do. They don't really like doing surgery for that indication. Hip is kind of Wild West for this. It's also ubiquitous. So gluteus medius tears are ubiquitous. Over age 70, most people have these types of tears. Oftentimes they go on, and when you see someone older limping down the street, usually they have a tear of the tendon. That's usually the problem. Like my mother, for example. So the tendons tear, they go on to muscle atrophy, and that's when they're irreparable. So we repair these early. Again, surgeons don't really want to touch these people, usually over age 70. You have a lot of comorbidities, and it's also doesn't pay that great for the surgeons. In addition, surgeons have told me that work on this. One of them's one of our advisors, that once they are the person in their practice that does this, they get all the referrals, which means that they're going to be doing this all day long, every day. So they don't really like to do this. They're very happy to hand this off to us. The other interesting thing is that we've gotten a lot of interest from joint replacement surgeons to do this as an adjunct to their total hip replacements, because a lot of patients go on to get gluteus medius tears after total hip replacement, especially if they use a lateral anterolateral approach.
On that specifically, so that actually dovetails very nicely into one of my many questions, but the last one I'll ask today is it struck me that the add-on surgery is a huge benefit because you're able to see there, get in there, and as you mentioned, during hip replacement, that's a huge problem in terms of repeat injury or dissatisfaction with the surgery. Are there what's the right word? Compensation metrics? Do you have billable codes for add-on surgery as well?
Yeah, there are codes for tendon repair all around the body. The only sticking point is the shoulder is such a mature area that they specify the method of repair. So we will probably have to get a new CPT code for that, except for biceps tenodesis, which is another potential application. But for hip, it's just a standard code for tendon repair.
Perfect transition. So you don't foresee needing a differentiated CPT code, given the fact that you're coming in a less invasive fashion. Like, that's not a problem for you.
No, in fact, insurers should be very positive about
what they
this,
should do versus what they do, we know is often very different. But
well, applying this code with the appropriate information, we've been advised by a number of our advisors that it will work. Very similar to what Sonex does and 10X. 10X does percutaneous tenotomy, and they use surgical tenotomy codes. Sonex does percutaneous carpal tunnel release, and they use surgical carpal tunnel codes. And we do those at our institution, and they are paid.
Excellent. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thanks, guys. That's a great presentation. We're out of time now, but thank you, Adam. Thank you, William. And thank you, Michael, for the good questions there.
Thank you.
Let's bring up our final presenter today, Michael Hendricks of Alcanza. This is not a life science deal, but we had an open slot and wanted to invite him out as well. So with that, Michael, let's go ahead and get your slides up and kick off.
All right. Thank you very much. Everybody can see my slides, I'm assuming.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right, sounds great. I'm Michael Hendricks, founder and CEO of Alcanza. As you can see, Alcanza is a online digital platform that allows people to have better access to immigration services, makes it more accessible, more affordable, and more user-friendly. And we're going to talk about each one of these things. But before I get into exactly what it is that we do, I want to talk about the problem. So if you put a group of people into a room, and you told them, describe immigration for me in 1 or 2 words, you would get responses across the board. You would have people saying, you know, asylum, border wall, threat to security, indispensable, cost of attorneys, delays, frustration with attorneys. You'd have all of these different answers, and many of them would be correct in certain ways, and they would never be able to agree on the exact issue that we're confronting, but they would all be able to agree that there is a big problem. And so we want to talk a little bit about the problem that we see with immigration these days and how we are working to fix it. So many of the problems stem from the fact that immigration is not very accessible. And what I mean by that, there's just not a lot of ways for you to get into the immigration system. They don't have very many of their products available online digitally. They all have to be done in one specific language. And even when they're done in the language and you have access to it, normally there's an 80%, or statistically rather, there's an 80% fail rate if you attempt to do something in immigration or request a benefit without using a system like Alcanza or an immigration attorney. So it's very expensive. limited resources available to people, and limited guidance that's available. So it's a very big problem. That makes it inaccessible. It's not very user-friendly because you have to have, even if you're using the online system, you have to have a home PC. And as we know, most of the world jumped the home PC. They don't use home computer systems. They went from nothing to the phone. Our phones are mini computer systems. And if you don't have access to these systems on your phone, many people don't have access to internet or access to local computers. So it makes it very inaccessible and not user-friendly in that it all has to be done in English. So everything has to be submitted in English. And a lot of people would say, that's great, they need to learn English. Yeah, great, that's fine. I understand that completely. But if you look at it from the standpoint of, I speak a bunch of languages and I speak several of them fluently. But when I want to do something that is medical related, that is law related, anything that is very important, I'm going to want to do that in my native language. Why? Because I know that I'm understanding and I'm able to respond. And something as important as the immigration process, or even the medical process, you want to make sure that you're understanding what you're doing. And the costs are exorbitant and they're just going up. So there is a $10.5 billion yearly expense to immigration attorneys just in the US. This doesn't include notarios. This doesn't include the loss for people, opportunity loss, costs for people doing it on their own, or what people pay for people outside the country to assist them in these processes. So the expenses are very high. It is a very big problem. It requires a very big solution. So in steps Alcanza. Alcanza, as I previously stated, is a digital platform that offers personalized guidance from human guides, but it is scalable. And the reason it's scalable is because of multiple things. Number one, our system is built on a stack platform that allows for there to be an exponential increase in services provided and information and documents and processes being able to be processed, while not having the same exponential increase in human resource necessity. And number two, and what I'm going to show you guys here in a minute, which is the most exciting thing for me, is we're one of the very first people, if not the first, to bring AI to immigration law. I've heard of some other groups that are doing it, but they're only doing it for access with attorneys to actually look into cases and to be able to write up documentation. So in a minute, I'm going to share another portion and do like a test case on the AI that we have built that is actually being trained. So our AI was, quote unquote, I like to use the word born a couple weeks ago, and we have been training it through this process. And unfortunately, it's not been done before. Fortunate for me, unfortunate for the people who need it, because you have to have a few things that come together in order to make this happen. You, one, have to have the expertise in the system. Two, you have to have the expertise in technology. Three, you have to have the resources. And four, you have to have the time. We literally just had the ChatGPT, bubble that started to come out. And so we're taking advantage of what's happening, and we're able to make this, take the nascent version of these different, actually, we're using a commercially licensed Llama 2 product, and we're going to be building out our own. But right now we use the commercially licensed Llama 2, and we're able to build on top of that expert immigration advice. And I'm doing that personally. I've been in immigration for over 12 years as a licensed attorney for almost 10. So we're using state-of-the-art technology, experienced team to empower these immigrants to be able to reach their goal of obtaining benefits in the United States. And so one of the things that I like to do, I like to go through each one of the things and say, okay, how do we make it more accessible? We make this more accessible by allowing people to have access to the system from anywhere. Here in this quarter, actually just signed the deal to start building our native app that will also include our artificial intelligence. And what it will allow is for all the people in the world who do not have access to the internet through a personal computer to be able to access our system. And we are going to offer the application and the access to the general AI in our system 100% free, because those aren't the things that we're selling. Those are the ways we bring people into the system. Now, we will have specialized AI provisions that will have a cost associated with them at a B2B model. But right now, the direct to consumer, the D2C, we're using these systems, the app and the AI, as the hook to bring them in, and then they're buying the immigration and translation products. So we make it more accessible by giving it everywhere in the world. We make it more accessible by having it available on almost any device in the world. And we have it available in 125 languages here. Once we get the AI trained more, it's going to take a full year to get it fully trained, but it's already trained and it should be in production here within the next about 2 months to where people can start using it. We will have an overlay, a language overlay, which will allow it to receive questions and answer questions in 125 the most spoken languages in the world. As you can see, some of these statistics, they're up here. They provide some information about the market, the growth market, the market opportunity that exists, and how that's going to increase over the next several years, and how immigrants are seen to benefit the country, not harm the country. So our business model is acquisition via various media. First, we're going to look for right now, what we use is a D2C. So this product is already at market. It is at 90%. There is one small portion of the automation that we're finalizing in order for a client to be able to go from eligibility determinations, purchase products, to be able to hook over to actually competing their products, having it reviewed, and then being able to move forward. So we're providing greater accessibility in that way. We're also providing greater affordability, and we'll get into the way we acquire them in a second. We're greater affordability in that we only charge about 20 to 25% of what an attorney charges, but it's more user-friendly because it's available in their language, it's available to them, and it's available in a way to where they get the benefits of having a legal resource without having the cost of a legal resource. And let me explain that. So since this was founded by myself, who is an attorney, immigration attorney licensed for many years, an expert in my area, then what I was able to do is take my name and attach it and allow it to be able to create, for instance, this AI from my brain, from my information. So when we talk about, a lot of people, when they say they're talking about AIs and like ChatGPT, it's more of a chat bot, right? It's an AI, but it's a chat version. So you ask it questions and it gives you these answers that are from a chat, whereas ours is not only a generative AI, it will also be a determinative AI, and that's what we're working on, which will give us a great opportunity in the future, which we'll talk about the way that we'll bring in money, not just D2C, but B2B, and to certain companies, and maybe even the B2G, which is the to the government, so business to government contract. So we're looking at that as well. So we make it more user-friendly, more accessible, and more affordable by bringing all this together. And the way we bring people in is digital marketing, of course, websites, social media, influencers, trade groups, referral groups, B2B systems that are in development, and then future government contracts. What's important here is not currently what we're at. Right now, we are at revenue. We are bringing in money. We are selling products. But it is the very beginning. We haven't even begun to market generally to the United States, much less to the world. And that's because we're working on perfecting. We're using what we have now to perfect our system to make sure that we don't run into any issues where we oversell or undersell ourselves. We want to make sure that we're bringing people in and being able to keep clients satisfied, get good reviews, and be able to grow from there. And we're doing that by having a simple system, an accessible system, understandable, no required expertise, affordable, and guided. And then we can wash, rinse, and repeat with everyone. Now, some people say, hey, is there anybody else in the space doing this? The fact is there are a few places that have web apps that all they do is take the information that they're given and build out forms. So basically they're form fillers, and we are not form fillers. We do, that is one of the very base functions that we have. But our AI, as we build into it, will actually start to be a determinative AI, which means that it allows for us to have a personal assistant that is actually walking through the system in the form of artificial intelligence that will then tell the person what they're missing and how to fill the gaps of what they're missing to have the best opportunity. And the best thing, so these competitors don't really compete in the same space, although I wanted to put them up there just in case anybody went and looked and said, oh, there's people doing online immigration services. So they don't really compete because they don't have anything even close to what we're going to be providing. But it does bring us to this point. So for me, the most important thing, there's a lot of information on here, and I can answer any questions that you may have. But really the big thing is right now we're starting direct to consumer, but we have a B2B model, which will allow two ways for attorneys to use it. They can either be an affiliate and send people who don't want to spend that costly amount for an attorney, and then they get a portion, or they can use our actual system and get an enterprise model where they'll be able to use the system, do their processes in their own law firm with the system, and also use the AI based on a product model. And of course, we have a lot of upsells. We have document translations. The great thing for the D2C, though, is that they get the guide, they get the AI, but then they also, and for most packets, automatically includes an attorney review. So you get the opportunity to have an attorney reviewing your application prior to it being given back to you for submittal. Of course, a lot of people want to know what the revenue looks like this. So far, this year, we're just starting to track our revenue because we are at revenue. And so over this last year, we did 25,000, but that was very early stages. The whole year, only 25,000. This year, we've already done 50 through July, and 32 of that has come in May, June, and July. And this month, we're on task to do 20 and looking to grow exponentially, because now that the product has gotten to where it's almost fully automated, then we're able to grow exponentially, especially with the advent of our app and AI. And I can give more information on that if you're interested. This is the team. Of course, everybody looks at a team to see who they're getting in bed with and who they are investing in. We have a very well-built team. I bring all the legal expertise. We have a team that has 20 years in management and computer systems technologies that work on the computer system. And of course, we have marketing teams and our advisory board and implementation. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go quickly. Exit strategies. Of course, there could always be the exit strategy of having an Intuit that runs TurboTax and those other places that would say this is something similar, or Lidos, who already does over 100 million IRS tax applications every year. They process them for the IRS, so it would be right down their vein. And the IRS just announced actually that they're going to be requiring all digital submissions by 2025. So this kind of is dovetailing all together, because we can just push immigration to be working hand in hand and to do the same thing as the IRS to make things better for them and determinative. And most importantly, a government contract. The government contract would look something like, we currently have a broken immigration system and we can't seem to fix it with the technology we have. How do we fix this? And so we would come in and be able to provide the solution of, here is the plan that we have, here's the system that already exists. And best of all, the system will be tied together so that people can apply at the same time. And then subsequently, the officers will be given a probability of approval, and that will allow them to make approval decisions in record time. Right now, 40 to 80 man hours, 9 to 18 months to make decisions on most things. We could reduce that to about 4 man hours in probably 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the process. So very exciting. Of course, we can look at the IPO and going public, but I think it's a little early to be looking at that. And with that, I open up for any questions.
Well, we have time for just one question. How much are you trying to raise right now? How much funding are you looking for?
Yes, a very specific thing that I missed saying. So we are at a 4 million pre-money and we're looking to raise $1 million. So that's what we're looking for. And we have raised a seed round of, I don't know if you call it a pre-seed round, actually, of about 200,000. So now we're looking at doing this beginning round, the seed round, really, I guess this is, of $1 million with a pre-money of 4 million valuation.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for the presentation of the questions today, Michael, but appreciate you sharing that with us and looking forward to next steps there as well. If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and close it for the day. I want to thank everybody for joining, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.